We are Group 4. The topic of our presentation is the study of post-colonial theory. Our group members include Baiting, Luqun, Wu Yimei, and Gong Difeng. We have 4 parts. The first part is summary. The first essay took the exam of Mr. Richard Williams' translation of Chinese classical into German, and argued that translations during the colonial period did not necessarily serve the colonial powers. The second article debates that some very specific and tangible linguistic issues of post-colonial translation in social, linguistic, and linguistic, political, and social, cultural, and pragmatic terms. The third article aims to discover post-colonialism that focuses on its various approaches to translation. The text illuminates the role of power in the production and reception of translation. The fourth article aims to define and describe the linguistic and cultural status of post-colonial texts to establish the relationship between post-colonial writing and translation, and to discuss the dialectical relationship between translation theory and practice in light of the contributions of post-colonial translation studies.
Now let's talk about the analysis of these 4 articles. Next. For the commonalities between the previous 2 articles, these 2 articles from the author's point of view jointly express that the post-colonial theory does not only serve the colonists, it also can praise the culture of a colonized country. And for the commonalities between the latter 2 articles, these 2 essays explore the characteristics of post-colonial translation theory itself. Next. And for the differences between the previous 2 articles, in the first article, the author explained that the culture of the colonized country should be accepted with respect from the standpoint of the colonial country. And the author of the second article, coming from a colonized country, explained more about having confidence in the culture of one's own country and making other countries realize the charm of their own language. And for the differences between the latter 2 articles, the first article focuses on the function of post-colonial translation theory in linguistic communication, and the second article mainly describes the development of the post-colonial translation theory and its translation methods. The next one.
Okay, let's moving on to part 3, findings of articles. According to Hudson and Lethbridge 2014, post-colonial methods were mainly concerned with cultural translation, such as translation interpreted figuratively as a translation between cultures and had little respect for language issues. Whereas translation studies emphasized the standard of translation as a linguistic observe requiring intercultural meditation. In the past few years, many translation scholars have become interested in post-colonialism, which is often used to study the history of past colonies, powerful European empires, and in a broader sense, the effects of the imbalance of power between the colonized and the colonizer. However, some very concrete and tangible linguistic issues concerned in post-colonial translation are neglected, especially in the field of linguistic inquiry. Hu Kongze, Mollison, and Bandia examine linguistic elements of post-colonial translation in their articles. The first 2 articles emphasize the translator's ideology, and how they employed distinct translation tactics to spread Chinese culture or respect African languages. There are few examples of a post-colonial translation theory improving the culture and language of the colony, but translation is necessary to retain linguistic diversity and build textual archives of literature. Just as Mullisin sighed, many years later, this plea for diversification through translation is more topical than ever and may be one of the true challenges of the post-colonial world. In next slide. And Bendia explored the concept of translation as a metaphor for post-colonial writing, especially in the African post-colonial context, which means that the works of post-colonial authors can be seen as translation at the same time. Because of the experience of being colonized, often they're bilingual. In the Marriage in 1992 state that post-colonial European language writing is indeed the result of a form of radical bilingualism, evoking two alien or remote language cultures simultaneously. Similarly, some others thought that as a creative writing technique, this type of linguistic experimentation can only lead to a dead end, as it seems somewhat unrealistic to attempt to create a fully fledged language based on a literal translation from one distinct, alien, or disparate language to another. Habermas in 1984 argued that we're never locked within a single grammar. Rather, the first grammar that we learn to master already put us in a position to step out of it and to interpret what is foreign, to make comprehensible what is incomprehensible, to assimilate in our words what at first escapes them. So regarding the apparent limitation of the hybrid post-colonial text, we can only echo Habermas' view that if one genuinely seeks to understand the beliefs or value of an alien culture, one is likely to find them worthy of consideration from a common point of view of humanity. That's all.
And in part 4, I will make a conclusion. Post-colonial translation survey is a set of ideas, judgments, and metaphors about translation that were made in the context of post-colonial criticism. The post-colonial intervention in translation studies not only changes the social culture, political power, and ideological context of translation activities, but it also changes the language and the culture of the people who were colonized. From these 4 articles, it's clear that the post-colonial approach to translation studies has had a bigger effect on how the relationship or dialectical between thought and practice is judged. It's clear that translation in post-colonial settings requires a deep and constant rethink and testing of power relations and perspective in culture and linguistic communication. It's also clear that translation is important to keep different languages alive and to make it possible for language to create archives of text. And next is our reference, and that's all. Thank you.